Welcome back to the podcast today and to today's episode. Today on the show, I welcome Luke, where we're going to be talking about men's work, we're going to be talking about shadow work, we're going to be touching on things like healing a little bit, vision, and many more subjects, I'm sure. So, just a quick introduction to Luke, and then we'll dive into today's conversation. So, Luke is the creator of Visionary Men, community of men healing and stepping into our greatest vision as brothers. So, Luke, welcome to the show today. Glad we can make this happen. So you're into men's work. I'm very much into it myself. We were just saying that before the show. Very passionate about it, helping guys and grow and also like work through their challenges. You know, I love seeing these communities out there and like brotherhood, and I know that's what you're doing out there. So thank you for all the work you're doing in the world. Be really interesting, just first of all, because some of us work on ourselves, some of us go into this kind of work. A little bit about your journey and what got you into men's work, really, and creating a community.
Yeah. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the question. So I would say the thing that got me into it was about 8 years ago was kind of when I kind of started stepping into like healing work through plant medicines.
Mm,
And I think as I kind of did a lot of plant medicine work over the years, I really struggled with integration, or how do I actually like integrate these experiences.
mm,
I'm having these healing experiences over a couple of days, but how do I actually integrate that in a day-to-day of my life? And I actually never heard of men's work at a certain point, but I was living in Mallorca, I was building community, and I was running events. I never knew men's work existed, but my intuition guided me to just start a men's circle. So it was just like, okay, let's bring a bunch of guys in the forest with a fire and just have real talk, not surface level talk, right?
mm,
And what I realized, that was a big initiation for me because we did that like once every couple of weeks for like 6 months. And then I realized that from that, the mirror of my own blind spots, specifically around sexuality, it was really keeping me stuck in life. And it was a deep pattern that was controlling everything. And then after that, I did a lot of research and found, oh, what? Actually, men's work is actually a thing. There's loads of organizations, there's loads of things going on. And in
mm.
Mallorca at the time, there was literally like, there was one other men's circle and then like another men's gathering. So it was very like limited in Mallorca. So I started to kind of build that up a little bit. And then in the UK, when I kind of like went back there for a little bit, I realized it was actually like a lot more common in the UK. And I come across like at least like 20 different organizations in the UK. And I think that it was basically one of the missing pieces because I never really had that brotherhood connection in my
Mm.
life. I had friends, I had like other guys as friends, but we were just like used to like, taking the piss out of each other and
Mm.
not really like being there as what I see brotherhood now. And that kind of changed my whole perception of what it meant to be like a true friend, a true brother, and it redefined what relationships look like to me.
Oh wow, that's really interesting that you kind of just set this group up, just as like an idea, and then actually you're able to get a lot more insight into this area and actually see some of your own blind spots, and therefore it kind of went a little bit forward as well. And and you said that came from like plant medicine to seeing how you actually integrate that as well. Um,
Mhm.
was in you mentioned about like healing a little bit.
Yeah.
Was the what is like healing for you, and what do you find like useful for healing? Is the men's group like fundamental to that?
Yeah, I feel like it's been a journey. I feel like my perception of healing, it's always changing. And
Mm,
I realized that when I first stepped into like doing like plant medicines and stuff, there was a lot of bypassing going on in my journey, a lot of like spiritual bypassing and not really knowing what to do, not really having the right support. Um, and I was also like, for me, plant medicines actually became another addiction
Mm.
to a certain extent. Now, as I started to reach out for like support from like mentors and guides and all that kind of stuff, my whole perception of healing changed in that moment. And I think my more understanding of healing changed was when I had support and guidance from those that have truly walked the path
Mm.
before I have. And I couldn't find that support for a long time. I realized as a man, I was this is just my own experience, of course, but I realized that as a man, I struggled to reach out for support, or I was reaching out for support and I was reaching out for the wrong kind of support subconsciously. So I was always attracting the people that could maybe support a little bit, but they couldn't really hold me through the depths of emotions that the healing required. Um, and eventually, I kind of just, on a soul level, I knew that I had to find a solution. So I would just always like, whatever resistance I came across in that journey of healing, I would always put myself in situations and lean into that resistance when it would come up. And I would go through those levels of discomfort. Um, and my true, I think when it first started, the true bits of healing for me was when I had a mentor in Spain, and he works with the sweat lodge ceremonies, and that's all about um, relationship building because you're in deep prayer in ceremony, you're connecting with the lands, you're connecting to ancestors in these sweat lodge ceremonies. And doing that every so often, it was like being back in the womb of the mother's womb. So a lot of those deep ancestral patterns that were affecting me, that started to come through in the sweat lodges.
Mm.
And then ever since I kind of went into those containers, I then was always, my perception was always open to then eventually attracting the right people that could hold me through that. So answer to your question was, it's just the healing was about having the right support in the right moment from the right people.
Mm. That's I love to hear like different interpretations, and yeah, that's a really great insight you shared there in terms of having the right people or reaching out, and also mentioning about subconsciously reaching out to the wrong people. I thought that was really interesting as well, or people you didn't feel were as
Mm.
right. So yeah, is it something? Do you find there's times where you have to sit with yourself a little bit more and connect to some of those experiences and like even now, or is it kind of just something that went on? I'm just always curious to hear people's kind of like
Mhm.
healing process and journey.
Like, how do I integrate that when I'm alone, for example?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, now, yeah.
Yeah, of course. Like a huge part of that, a huge part of reaching out and having support from people, the integration actually, you only integrate the healing in from my experience, I've only ever integrated it fully is by having just as much time alone and really being with that and really allowing that time to really
Mm,
process all those things that have come up. Because it's easy to go through those healing experiences and then distract ourselves afterwards. But I feel that the full spectrum of that healing process actually comes when you are alone and you can process things, you can integrate, you can journal on it, you can reflect on it and see how that goes. Now, how that looks like for me now is as I'm a facilitator and I facilitate, things like neurosomatic work, breath work, anger and rage release and all these processes. Now, a lot of the time is that whenever I go through encounters in life, like I spend time with my family or I'm with relationships and they bring up triggers, then I'll always have to take myself in ceremony and process these emotions when they come up because if I don't, my energy levels are just going to be down.
mm,
I'm always like intuitively taking myself in these processes, not necessarily staying in them too long, because sometimes you can stay in them too long if you don't know how to get out of the emotion. But
Mm.
sometimes it's like honoring those emotions and then allowing what needs to come through and then getting back to reality and what it is you want to create.
Mm. It's interesting you're talking about the processing emotions because that's something I've particularly been guilty of in the past of like go 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 like hustle hustle. It's like emotions meh like it can wait, it can wait, it can wait.
I know what you
Like,
mean.
I'm angry, I'm stressed, oh, just keep going kind of thing. I found personally now, and it's funny you should say this. I was listening. Do you know come across John Wineland at
I've
all?
not heard of him, no.
No, he's got a great book called From the Core, and yeah, he talks a lot about nervous system regulation and his perception of masculinity and developing that healthily and balancing it with your feminine energy. But yeah, he was talking about just scheduling that, even that like 30 minutes if you're going through one of those phases a day. It could be 30, it could be a 30-second release, it could be a 30-minute release, could be
Mm.
longer. Um, and just like really feeling some of those emotions a little bit. Because
Of
yeah,
course,
I
yeah.
felt it when it impacts the energy as well, like you were just touching on there. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Like I like that is my like foundational piece is like no matter how much work I have to do, like that's like my top priority is like my health and my energy because I know that everything else will just naturally
Mm,
produce a lot better if I'm in that, high energy state.
yeah, I'm with you. It's yeah, high priority like mentally and physically. I find personally. So no, that's awesome. Yeah, Luke, can you tell us a little bit about what is the neurosomatic work that you're doing?
Yeah, so I did the facilitator training about 6 months ago now. And it's a modality which is a combination of many different tools all in one.
Mm,
So you've got like ancient elemental wisdom, you've got breath work in there, you've
mm,
got sound, you've got movement, you've got belief system work, you've got emotional work, somatic work.
mm,
You've also got prayer in there as well. And essentially, we've got like an emotion testing sheet. So if somebody has like a specific challenge in their life that they're navigating, it could be around relationships, it could be around money, it could be around trauma, whatever it is, then if they have an unconscious belief in their mind, then through that method, I would test what percent it is in their unconscious. If they're experiencing challenges, it might be like 1 to 3% as an example. And then in a session of, let's say, an hour to an hour and a half, we will then get to that 100%.
mm,
We would also see what three emotions are connected to that belief as well. And then we will then process it through somatic work and all that kind of, all those other things that I just talked about. And then when we've reframed that belief, then it allows them to recreate from that new place. If it's a deep core pattern that's been years and years and years, then there might be like, for example, 100 beliefs to that one core pattern. So it
mm,
might take multiple experiences. So it obviously depends whatever it is they're moving through. But I've healed a lot of sexual trauma through
mm.
this neurosomatic work and really
Wow.
get into the core of where the core patterns and the core wounding is actually like coming through and being able to like process that in a day to day, if that makes sense.
Mm, mm. It sounds like would I be accurate in saying it's like like you said, it's a combination of different, like it's a modality combination of many things, but it's combining the mind and the body,
Yeah, exactly.
both sides. Because
Yeah.
yeah, I know, like typical when I got the personal growth at first, it's very there's some amazing stuff out there. You got the Tony Robbins, all that kind of thing, and it's
Yeah.
but then it was like when I started discovery around somatic breath work, wow, the amount of things I was able to release further. And yes, so going from like the mind to the body, because this I didn't realize how much is stored in the body and like all these emotions and some of these patterns that are driven from the body. So yeah, that sounds super powerful, like combining the mind and the body in that sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one thing that I really struggled with for a couple of years was I was doing a lot of the somatic work, I was doing a lot of the breath work, but I didn't know how to do the healing on the mind.
Mm,
And for me, it's just as important because I was actually stuck in like levels of disassociation because I was healing the emotions in the body, but there was still a conflict between the mind and the body, and I couldn't actually like integrate things properly.
mm, So, what's the most powerful thing you found for the mind?
Yeah, so it's a combination of the belief system work,
Mm.
which is neurosomatic, and then also a book which I will recommend to absolutely everyone. It's the best book I've ever read, and I'm studying it now. It's A Course in Miracles.
Okay.
And my mentor in Spain, he basically studied it for 13 years, and he was one of the very few that I really seen that really like healed the mind so much that it was just never in control. Like the ego had no power in his life. It was just, or whenever I was with him, it was just pure spirit. Um, and it was from that book because I realized after studying it for the last year, it's healed a lot of the deep patterns in my mind where I was not able to forgive a lot of the things in my childhood or a lot of those like unconscious patterns um, in a like more like simplified way, if that makes sense.
A Course in Miracles, you
A
say?
Course in Miracles, yeah.
Okay. Who's it by?
It's written by somebody called Helen Schumann,
Okay, I may have come
uh,
across it. No, just yeah, no,
but
it's
it's basically channeled by Jesus, Yeshua,
cool.
and I really feel that when I read the book, the energy of like Jesus, when I'm kind of like feeling that book by itself, it feels like because she was basically channeled the message, and then she just got the message to write out this book, and that's how it happened.
Oh wow, that sounds powerful. No, it's great. Thanks for the guidance on the mind. So yeah, I wondered in the kind of work you're doing,
Yeah.
do you do any kind of like shadow work with people?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And yeah, could you just outline a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so the way I see shadow work is essentially it's about bringing the unconscious to the conscious. It's also like loving the parts of ourselves which we might have shamed, which we didn't like. It's that part of ourselves which
Mm,
can create these like self-sabotaging like mechanisms or self-destructive mechanisms within our life. For me, I really suppressed my shadow for so long in
mm,
my life. And I was really shamed about my sexuality and a lot of the things that I did. And I avoided that. And until I started loving those parts, then that shadow would just leak out in my life, in my relationships, and for a very long time, I was not actually aware of those patterns of how it would come out. Another one being that I was never able to attract like romantic relationships or was never worthy to receive love romantically. It's only recently I've actually been able to, you know what, I'm actually worthy now for that romantic partnership.
mm,
But a lot of that for me is down to the shadow. And I feel that we all have our own shadow. And I feel like it's our dark side. It's a side of us that I feel it in moments. It's there's a kind of dark energy where it's the energy that could even kill someone in certain moments. I feel that we all have that ability
mm,
because as a society, as collective, we've gone through so much trauma
mm,
there's so much genocide in the world, and there is the light and the dark, and I think that is the only way to fully integrate um, oneself and to go through. That is a necessary part of the healing journey. Is actually integrating that shadow, loving that part. But I think it's a constant evolution of how the shadow is. Um, because my perception of it even changed like 3 months ago. It was like I almost had like a quantum shift of how the shadow operates and how it takes over the mind and how it convinces us to just stay in these kind of like core patterns or these core ways of being and like a core like being of like in a certain like lifestyle, if that makes sense.
Mm. So being very, yeah, sort of like being very honest and actually looking at it and then and then uncovering a little bit of actually what it's doing, maybe holding you back a little bit, sounds like.
Exactly, and I think it's also it's connected to the inner child, you know, it's that part of ourselves as a child that wasn't loved, that wasn't nurtured, that maybe didn't receive that support from from our family or our parents that we really wanted, maybe on a more deeper like emotional level. And I think that part that's not been loved, it's actually like meeting that self and learning how to kind of bring that back into coherence in some way.
Mm. Mm. Oh, amazing. Yeah, I remember doing shadow work with one of my coaches the first time, and this wasn't even that long ago, it was a couple of years ago. Um, and then like really diving into the stuff and actually it can be challenging, but actually exposing the light to some of those things, even admitting them was a bit of a stepping stone sometimes.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah. But even saying it to one person could be a big can be a big jump. I personally found. I don't know about you, and it's about integrating it going forward. When I did it, so
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, for sure. I totally relate with that. It's not easy, but on the other side, I think it's worth it, you know.
mm, oh, amazing. Yeah, Luke. Obviously you're helping men with like finding their vision. I know a lot of people out there, not just men, but a lot of us speaking to people are like really stuck with like, what is it I'm gonna do? Um, what am I here? Obviously, maybe you're in a
Hmm.
job and you don't enjoy that, or maybe and you know something bigger. Maybe you're in a business, you're not finding that's it. Maybe you're just a little bit lost. Certainly, been there many times, but yeah, like how do you help? How can someone start the initial steps to looking towards their vision? Do you think from some of the work you've done with people or
Hmm.
guys?
Yeah. Um, the initial steps, I feel like part of it is like reaching out for support. It's immersing yourself in containers which allow you to see these blind spots that we have. I feel that a cloudy mind cannot see a true vision. So if we've got things in the way in our mind, how can we see true vision? If we've got these patterns in the way, all these things in the past, then I'd say part of it is taking those steps, reaching out for support, going through that healing process, um, and also immersing yourself in environments which create true vision. You know, things like sweat lodge ceremonies is that path of vision. There's vision quests out there as well. And also for me, like one big thing for me was I lived, this was just part of my journey, but I lived in the forest for like 8 months. And I think that really opened my eyes to like true vision because I
Wow.
was just immersed in the elements
Mm,
and there was not as much technology. And I was connecting with the elemental beings of the forest, and they
mm,
like really opened me up to like what vision maybe could look like. So detaching myself away from like technology, fasting and being in the elements like really opens us up to vision because you're just connecting back to earth in a harmonious way. And then that's, I think, where our true intuition comes from, is being immersed in nature without distractions. And then when those patterns are not as the majority, then a lot of that true vision will just start to come through in like downloads, and it will just start coming through in naturally.
some great first steps there. And wow, 8 months in the forest. I can imagine. I remember going to Peru and like doing a ceremony there, like end of last year, actually, almost a year ago, and just being out in there away from the technology and stuff. Although some of the things rise to the surface, I'm not going to lie. Some of the biggest, like I've not got my phone or coffee or a load
Mm.
of food or things to distract me. So certainly things up to rise, but the clarity and I experienced even from being there for 10 days was just like wow. So 8 months in the forest, I love that. Yeah, nature sounds like nature is a great step if you can get out there, but Yeah,
Yeah,
the
for
the
sure.
support one I totally love as well. It's a big part of it, just helping people to guide you along that way, and the right people as well, right? Sometimes
Of course,
there
it's
could be the
important
wrong
for the right
people.
people, for
Yeah,
sure.
could be people forcing their agendas on you as well. So don't be afraid to walk away. Is what I would also give as guidance to the listener if it doesn't feel right for you. So, yeah, Luke, really appreciate your time being on today. I know you offer a lot more work and you're doing a lot in sort of the area of men's work. So, yeah, before we wrap up today, where can the listener find you if they want to find out a little bit more about your work or connect with you?
Mhm.
And is there maybe a final point you wanted to share with us or just re emphasize from today?
I think the final point would be whatever decisions you make, there's always going to be resistance.
Hmm.
And are you going to lean into that resistance or are you going to just stay in the same position that
Hmm.
you are right now? The way I see it is the only way to create the life that you want, the vision that you want, is through that resistance, is through those fears. But on the other side of that, I feel it's worth it because you've got freedom, you've got peace, you've got joy, um, and life becomes more joyful. There's still challenges, but it's different. So that was just the final piece.
Hmm.
Um, and where they can find me, I've got basically all of my links on a link tree, which is linktr.ee/visionarymen. I've got a Facebook community on there. And then I'm also creating two different containers, which is basically you can either work with me in a group container, and then you've also got one-to-one as well. So there's two different options, but it's a minimum of 6 months because
Hmm.
for me, I know that this work takes time, and I am only committed to those that are also committed to themselves and that don't think that it's an overnight process.
Hmm.
So that's just a little bit about that too.
No, amazing. I fully agree, but it's not like a one-off session, put it that way. But this work, it's an
Yeah,
ongoing, and six
for
months
sure.
is,
Yeah,
yeah, 6 months is well, it's an ongoing journey for life. But
for
yeah,
sure. Yeah,
that's
that when you finish the 6 months, that's the
yeah,
starting point.
that's the start. Yeah, the start of the rest of your life. So love that. No, we'll be sure to link your the link tree up in the show notes because that sounds like an amazing opportunity. So once again, Luke, thank you so much for coming on and sharing everything you have today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. So that concludes today's episode. And remember to lead with your heart and not with fear.